said, we don't know a great deal about this subject. It hasn't been well researched, and so a lot of it, what I'm going to present, is speculation. But well-informed speculation. And it's a subject that hasn't attracted much attention, really, except in the world of pest management. As you heard, I do more than just butterflies. I'm an agricultural entomologist, and so I think of eruptions as outbreaks. In fact, when I was first approached to talk about butterfly eruptions, I immediately envisaged volcanology or volcanoes erupting, because eruption's not really a word used in pest management. It's pest outbreaks, but it's the same sort of hypothesis behind eruptions as in outbreaks. So, without further ado, erupt. So first of all, I had to look up what actually erupt means, and there's at least two definitions by and large. The first one is what I thought it was, to enter a region suddenly in very large numbers. But there's also a lot of dictionaries have the definition just to undergo a sudden upsurge in numbers, especially when natural ecological checks and balances are disturbed. So, it could be either. And so in this talk, I'll talk about our butterflies, the ones that suddenly enter this area in large numbers, but also we have a number that occur here that sometimes become far more common than the norm, if you like. So I actually thought this wasn't going to be a very long talk, because we don't know much about what I'm talking about. But as I dug further into the subject, I did find more, so it's a decent length talk. And there's lots of pretty pictures too. So the migrant eruptions, we really, and we do have a wealth of butterfly expertise in the room too, looking at John and David, so please chime in if you've got something to add. But I think we only have two migrant eruptors on a regular basis that occur in very large numbers anyway. I'll talk about some minor ones as well, but these two, the painted lady and the California tortoiseshell, are famed for exploding in large numbers. Yes, John?
Well, certainly the painted lady comes to this from another place, comes to our state from another place. The California tortoiseshell is resident, and it undergoes these.
As well, but I mean, I think a lot of them do come up as well when they have that eruptive year.
I don't know. That's something to be looked at. Then the other one, of course, is the pine white.
That's much later on in my talk. That's not a migrant eruption. Come on, pay attention. Talking about migrants here.
John, you described that California tortoiseshell is resident in the state. The state, we don't have a state. That's a boundary, what we call political boundary. We were seeing tons of those California tortoiseshells in western Washington, where we have hardly any host plant. When was that? 8 years ago?
Yeah,
9?
yeah.
I was 7.
Do you know the years?
Well, it's been off and on, but the reason is that they return to low elevations to diapause over the winter because it's a lot less hostile. They go through their spring migration uphill and then their fall migration back down.
So actually, I think the California tortoiseshell is probably an example of both. I mean, it does both. I mean, it erupts, resident populations erupt, but they're also reinforced by populations in California coming up as well. No? Really? We'll have to check that out there. I mean, I just remember in my first years in the Pacific Northwest, seeing them moving north within Washington, and I just assumed that they'd come from outside of Washington. You're saying that they were, I mean, this is around Wenatchee, they were heading north, in streams. Where would they have come from?
Well, I can't say where they came from, but there's not been a coordinated, like for instance, when there's outbreaks in California, there's not subsequent outbreaks in Oregon and or Washington.
Okay.
You'd have one in Washington, and Oregon would be, like moderate.
All right.
So, yeah, they're independent.
Okay, so really, the painted lady might be the only one of them. But we're going to talk more about these species in a minute. And then we have a moth, the white-lined sphinx, which I think is a migrant eruptor. Certainly it's, yes, I've got a thumbs up from David. Yes, who's the moth expert in the room. I mean, at this very moment, and I'll talk more about these in a minute, there is evidence that an eruption is building. And we do have this eruption occasionally. In fact, in my role as a pest management person, I had to deal with young vineyards being defoliated by caterpillars of this species. So it can occur in large numbers on occasions. And then we have some species that invade in small numbers, minor migrant eruptions. I guess they're probably not eruptions in the term, in the full sense of the word, but they certainly come along with the painted ladies, perhaps. So particularly the West Coast lady is often mixed in with the painted lady migration and maybe the American lady too. In recent years, the red admiral, it overwinters more now here, but we still have a migration up, and I definitely believe that one because we've seen them coming up through Oregon and causing actual damage to hop yards. There's so many hop yards, young hops as they're developing have been inundated with
red admirals feed on hops?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They actually, hop growers came to me with the problem of these caterpillars.
Well, it's the same family, right?
Yeah.
Hops
Well,
aren't the same family with hurricane?
closely related.
I don't remember.
They're in the same group of what we call verticoid roses.
Right.
But
I
hops
thought they were cannabinales.
they're roses. But hops are in.
Hops are in with pie.
Yes. Hops, hackberries, and pine, same family. Nettles are on
That
their.
explains the
Okay, and then there's the monarch, which you can't really call as an eruptor, but it certainly migrates north, and we know that. So, if we ever get populations back to what they were, there'll be a more significant migration northward each year. And then there's the resident butterflies in the Pacific Northwest that can have explosive or eruptive populations. Often just locally, like the Compton tortoiseshell, you have years of high abundance and then hardly anything for many years. Mourning cloaks the same. A few years ago, right, they were everywhere. I remember going on field trips with you and seeing caterpillars all over in the gorge, and at that time the butterflies were very common. But now, we've seen one this year. Stuart saw one in Cowishi Canyon, and I haven't seen any for last year. They weren't very common either. So orange sulphur is another one. At the end of seasons, they often, around alfalfa agricultural fields, they'll explode and there'll be millions of them. Becker's white is an occasional eruption I've noticed in my area, and going on from what John said about being green and lush this year as it is on the east as well as on the west. When they had this second generation of Becker's whites, you can sometimes, I remember driving on roads around Yakima, and every flower on the roadside was just white, covered in Becker's whites. So they've got the potential to. And then there's the big one, as John mentioned, pine white.
You throw western white in there too.
Really? I haven't seen it.
Well, it's pretty extreme. Normally, western whites are low density all over the state, right?
Yeah.
But in a year like this year, I think that they might have a big break.
Okay, interesting. Any more?
I think that's it.
Yeah. Okay, so looking at more detail of some of these species, the migrant eruptors, the painted lady, it's the world's butterfly. It's all over the world. I remember as a kid growing up loving butterflies and seeing painted ladies in England, and thistles just defoliated by caterpillars. So they were invading Britain at that time, and they still do. Vast invasions leading to huge populations of caterpillars eating every thistle. I mean, in England, they seem to just concentrate on thistles. But now we know they originate from North Africa, flying across the Sahara Desert in many cases. And it's, been only fairly recently that we've learned about these migrations. And in fact, using radar in the UK, they detected in 2009 11 million painted ladies, estimated, I guess, flying at 30 miles an hour, 3,000 feet in the spring. And later that same year, there was 26 million flying back. And they didn't know that there was a return flight, as we don't really know here that there's a return flight. But this suggests that we probably have a return flight as well. It's just at such a high altitude that we don't see it. It's logical to think that the butterfly does the same thing here, migration-wise, as it does in Europe. So that's they are remarkable migrants, and the distance they're travelling there, 9,000 miles round trip, is almost double the monarch migration. So So painted ladies in North America, we do have eruptions here in the Pacific Northwest irregularly every 5 to 10 years. And there's some evidence that they occur in association with El Nino events. In fact, we have Robert van den Bosch in the audience who actually wrote a couple of papers about this subject a few years ago, linking eruptions with El Nino. But they also can occur in non-El Nino years. So that the common factor in the eruptions is the fact that southerly areas of the US and Mexico have above average winter rainfall. And this produces abundant food resources for the caterpillars, and populations expand. And presumably there's more than just, as I talk through this, you'll see that there's always going to be more than one factor involved. And it's likely that this is the case here too. It's not just the fact that there's a huge resource of food for them, but there must be a low natural enemy abundance at the same time, because otherwise, the natural enemies would take care of the population. And that's one of the reasons why I think we know so little about eruptions, is because there are so many factors involved, probably, in all these instances. And as I said, we don't know all the factors causing eruptions. And because a lot of the butterflies, they're not economic pests or problems, there's not much research being done on them. So we get painted lady eruptions, and it's been some time since we've had one, hasn't it, John? I don't remember. It's been at least 5 years, probably.
Well, we've gotten over the last 10 years, pretty close to the annual records of painted ladies in April and May. And I've on several occasions gotten a number of them, and I expected, this is going to be you when they break out, and then nothing happens.
That's right. They seem to moderate as they get further north, probably because of natural enemies, predators and parasites, disease, taking a toll on them. So it's been, it must be at least 10 years since there's been a lot of painted ladies around. Nothing like, in Southern California where there's so many that roads are sometimes closed because there's so many painted ladies squashed on the road, it becomes slippery and unsafe. I mean, we never see anything like that. So an indicator appears to be the floral superbloom, so-called this year anyway, in the desert. And this is happening this year. Now this picture is taken from online, but I do have some real pictures from this year from my friend John Dayton, who lives in Santa Cruz and a monarch collaborator, and he and his wife went on a trip to look at the superbloom and kindly shared these pictures. So this is from March this year.
You know what the dominant flower is there? I don't know.
I don't.
It's a yellow one.
Yeah.
It's a yellow daisies, asteraceae. So there's some beautiful shots he took there. This is actually the trembler range in San Luis Obispo County. So this is food for painted ladies, both caterpillars and adults, of course. There was huge numbers. It wasn't a mass migration, but they were present.
David?
Yes.
Question.
Anza Borrego, which is a well-known place for seeing wildflowers, reported this spring the best year in decades. It really was an exceptional year.
Okay.
Another interesting thing is they've been doing a Swainson hawk count that goes through Anza Borrego for a number of years, and this year was by far the largest. And there were a lot of the white sphinx caterpillars around.
Right, and I'm just going to get onto that in a minute. The fact that John Dayton also saw the sphinx caterpillars there too. So potentially we could have a good season for painted ladies in the next few months. And in fact, there have been reports locally, well not locally, from Nevada and Utah of large numbers of painted ladies moving north. You've probably seen one that the Lepidoptera listservs. So there definitely is a migration building. Whether it continues developing, we'll have to wait and see. Okay, so this is my erroneous migrant eruptor, California tortoiseshell. Periodic mass migrations flow into the Pacific Northwest. See, I'm taking liberties with available knowledge here. But it's not often we see large numbers. Well, the last outbreak we had was 06, 07, I think. Yes, John.
Well, I gotta tell you, when I was growing up, my personal trajectory was, it was periodic. We'd go for 4 or 5 years without seeing any, then there'd be 1 or maybe 2 years where they'd explode, it'd be really common. Then we'd go through another 4 or 5 years, but from the time of WABA, this organization began, we had about almost a decade long, very, very common and abundant butterfly in this state, so that broke that string. Now we're back to where you don't see very many of them anymore. Last year, I observed, I think, 4 or 5, which was a surprise because the previous year I hadn't seen any.
And there were reports from Oregon last year that they were building up down south.
Well, no, they could conceivably occasionally come to, the state from Oregon. I'm not saying they don't, but that's not what they regularly do.
Right, okay. And I was expecting them to appear here, but they never did. So it was more of a local thing down there, more than they'd seen for many years, apparently. And this year they're seeing good numbers as well.
Good numbers of California tortoise shells. Where again?
In southern Oregon.
Southern Oregon, Medford.
So, yeah, outbreak populations of California tortoise shells can defoliate mountain ceanothus grass. And you've probably seen that, right? Yeah, big grin on his face. Have you seen the shimmering millions? You should have taken a picture and shared it. Have you? Did you take a picture of that?
You have to carry a camera to take pictures.
Well, yeah. I guess it was a long time ago, right? So, and they're audible too, right? You can hear them. I gather. Actually, sorry? You can hear them when they're moving. In fact, I saw one last year, one pupa moving, and you could hear them. And it turned out, I'll show a picture of it in a minute, it was parasitized, which is why it was moving. And so
also, they wiggle when you yell at them, just like...
Yeah. Yes, John, they do. Just like morning clothes, right? So there can be thousands of caterpillars on each ceanothus bush, and obviously this is from Dave and I's rearing for the book. And they produce large caterpillars, inch and a half long. So they have great potential when there's a lot of them to defoliate ceanothus. But in a normal year, like now, non-outbreak year, I think they are largely regulated by many natural enemies. I was excited to find this pupa last year in Northern California, and it was, as I was just saying, it was you could actually hear it. It was on a twig just a little way away, and you could hear it twitching backwards and forwards, and it drew attention visually too, because you could see the gold flashing on it. I thought it was a bit maladaptive to be doing that, to attracting things to go and eat it. But it turned out that it was parasitized and it's full of maggots, so that's why it was twitching, because it produced 100 wasps instead of a butterfly. I presume it was, in agony or whatever, and it wasn't a happy pupa. So parasitic wasps, I think, are probably one of the major natural enemies of this species. But again, it hasn't been researched. Have you picked up parasitized pupae of this species?
Yeah, well, actually, more larvae, but there's not just to kind of flies, but wasps.
Right. So it's like with all these things, when there's significant control of or suppression of a species, it's usually due to more than one natural enemy. It's a whole complex of natural enemies. And this is a basic fact for pest management and biological control, so I at least can be confident in saying that. And this is an example of a braconic wasp, which is one of the genera of wasps that will attack Lepidoptera larvae and pupae, just a few millimeters in length. So these things are very small, and a single chrysalis can produce 100 of these. So yeah, that's the California tortoiseshell. Pretty on the other side too. And these I got this from online, obviously. And if you Google, John and I were talking about Google earlier being such a great tool, but you Google migrating California tortoiseshells, and you get a climber blog where they actually, to their credit, identified butterflies as migrating California tortoiseshells and not monarchs, because I think there's some online saying there's migrating monarchs all around us while we're climbing up this peak in Oregon. So this was 2007, which is, as I recall, the last year when there was large numbers flying over the Cascades, probably coming to western Washington at that time. That's where they were heading. They were heading west and southwest, and in Oregon too. And since then we haven't seen them, but you just see the dots on the slide there, which are the butterflies flying past. Okay, the white-lined sphinx moth. So there's currently hundreds of thousands defoliating and deflowering the super bloom in California, apparently, not just in Anza Borrego, in other areas too, San Luis Obispo County. Yeah, they're huge larvae, so they can eat a lot of food. This is a John Dayton picture from this year. They have a couple of different colour forms, and you can see they're virtually denuding this plant here. There's actually a dozen, I think, I counted in this one slide. So, you know, it's hawk moth heaven, if you like hawk moths and want to rear hawk moths. Find all the hawk moths you like. In fact, they were being run over in the road too, so there was a lot of dead caterpillars in the roads. And in this slide too, you can see that caterpillars just all around.
David,
Yes.
how big is that? It's like it's a foot long.
Just the perspective from there. I mean, they grow to 2 inches, 2.5 inches.
I'd say 3.
Big caterpillars.
You have the picture of Beth's hand, right?
What?
You get that picture of Beth's hand?
In her hand, spans
So
a
They're
palm.
actually pretty,
Going. There you go.
I mean, look, it's
Span.
almost spanning the palm of her hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So much bigger than the adult. How big is it?
They're longer than the adults, yeah. So, you know, we sometimes get outbreaks here. You've seen outbreaks here, John, yes?
Yeah, it was really interesting about this genus, which is Hyades. It has a number of species in the Northwest, one which is going to be here soon from further north, the Hyades euphorbiae, that introduced near Vancouver, is going to be here. They all undergo these outbreaks. Soon after the eruption of Mount St. Helens, with all the fireweed that came up afterwards, one of the Hyades, I can't remember the name of it now, not Gallia, Hyades Gallia, yeah.
Right.
Not the white-line sphinx, but the Gallia sphinx. Hundreds of thousands of them. And, it's a moth that probably, there's maybe 7 or 8 specimens in collections,
Yeah, I've never seen one.
Right, and so and then the next year they were gone. And so that outbreak thing is characteristic of that genus.
Okay. So I think we can expect to see, I mean, we always see a few of these adult white-line sphinx every year, but this year I think we're going to see more than the normal number. And of course, we get a lot of reports from the public thinking that they're hummingbirds, because they look like hummingbirds, not hummingbird hawk moths. And of course, the mantids would be happy too, because when they get hold of one of them, they're set for a big meal.
Now, aren't these white-line sphinx active both day and night, the adults?
Yes, interesting.
So they call something active at night nocturnal, something active during the day diurnal. What do they call something active both day and night?
Active.
Diurnal. It's diurnal. Di is already taken. I made them up.
I think you did, but that's a good one. I want to use
Diurnal.
They seem to favour dusk. A lot of crepuscular, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So the minor migrant eruptions, eruptors, West Coast lady, you're probably all familiar with that. And often, as I said before, often mixed in within the painted lady population, except in recent years they've been on their own without painted ladies. The West Coast ladies have been, more common, in my experience, than painted ladies. And last year, in my experience, the American ladies were more common than painted ladies. I saw 4 or 5 American ladies. I don't think I saw any painted ladies last year. No?
Oh, well, I wanted to say something about the West Coast ladies, because they're a butterfly that is particularly suited to Western Washington, in that our mild winters allow them to do their thing all winter long. I have found larvae on hollyhocks and the Melba in people's gardens periodically for the last 40 years, all winter long. And even after a freeze, they don't seem to mind too much.
So they may be semi-resident here already.
Yeah, well, I think that they're even more semi-resident than the Red Admiral, which is,
Okay.
yeah.
So that may explain why I'm seeing more of them.
Well, yeah, if climate change is really a fact, then, probably severe winters are less and less severe, right?
Except this year on the east side.
Was this severe winter?
It was a severe winter for
Yeah, that's
us.
my arm.
Oh, yeah.
It was a below average winter. So, yeah, American ladies, they're beautiful butterflies, and I saw a few of them last year. In fact, I think we saw one on the conference in the Willowers last year, a couple of them actually. But all of the ladies probably erupt for the same factors, the good winter rains in the southern US, the development of their host plants, and causing the large numbers to develop. And there's the top side. And then there's the Red Admiral, which, as I mentioned before with the hops, is another one that definitely comes up in a minor way. It's not thousands of them, but they're noticeable. Particularly in the last couple of years in Yakima, they've turned up, about almost just before the monarchs turn up. Quite large numbers of them. In fact, Crab Creek site, they do. Yes, Bud?
That name, Red
Admirable.
Admirable, it's not Red Admiral, is it?
Well, you see, there's some people that like Red Admirable rather than Admiral. For the reason that they're not really admirals, because the admiral butterflies are things like Norquin Admiral, so they're not the same genus as that. And so it's sort of a misname, and so, it's pedantic, but yes, John.
Well, I had a similar problem last time I gave a presentation regarding green elephants.
Why?
Well, because they're not hair streaks. They don't have a hair streak,
Right. It's a terribly common name.
You can call them whatever you
You can
want.
call them whatever you like. Some people like to call them. I mean, I grew up with them as Red Admirals, as you probably did, and I'm not quite sure why I've called this Red Admiral here. I've just got.
Oh, it's pile.
I think
Piles.
it's Bob Pyle makes a point of
It's my tribute to Bob Pyle. There you go. So, as I mentioned before, outbreaks on hop yards have occurred in the last couple of years. Maybe that's a thing of the future. We hope not, because I don't want hop growers spraying for them. Luckily, I was able to tell them they're not going to cause a big deal. I mean, hop plants have enormous canopy, as you can see. And we're talking about when they're this height, the caterpillars coming on, so they're very noticeable at that time. But the plants grow, they grow a couple of inches every day. So, they can outgrow any damage, and I was able to tell them not to spray, and they didn't. And so, hopefully common sense will prevail if it happens again.
How tall are those?
20 feet?
20 feet at least,
Yeah. Then they get to the top about July 4th, right?
Are the mature hop leaves too tough for the larvae to eat? Are they
Well,
only on the young growth?
Yeah, I think so.
That's what I've heard tell is that all of those perennial plants that they say are alternate hosts for Vanessa here, they only feed on the young growth. So the
I think
Asian
you're right.
crossbills, the beamerias, and the hops, they
Yeah.
won't attack the mature foliage.
But something I neglected to mention is that when carderweed, when the painted lady comes in, especially if it's coming in large influxes, they will use lupin as their primary oviposition site. I didn't believe my eyes when I first saw it, and I could see these painted ladies laying eggs all over lupin. I went back and there was larvae feeding on lupin, and they didn't seem to mind. So I think exceptional behavior is also a product of these eruptions.
Yes. Well, it has to be probably, because, lack of
Have
cover.
to do something.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. So, the beloved monarch, this isn't an eruption, this is looking at the sky around an overwintering colony in California. It'd be nice if we saw them coming into the Pacific Northwest like this every year, but that's a fantasy for the future, maybe, hopefully. So they migrate into the Pacific Northwest, as we all know, but very minorly, especially in recent years. And I have nagging suspicion that this year might be worse than the last couple of years because the overwintering populations were hammered by late Pacific storms just as they were ready to depart, and I think the mortality may have been quite high. There's certainly been no reports yet of new generation monarchs in California. There should be.
Today was the first one.
Are you
Ken Davenport reported a brand new monarch.
brand new? Oh, okay. So it's a little bit later than normal, but so maybe because of the cooler conditions they've had there too, they're just a little bit delayed. Hopefully that's the case, and we will see as many as we've seen in the last couple of years. And they're never going to erupt like painted ladies because there's no winter breeding, obviously. It's just the population that goes down in the winter coming back in the spring. So mortality occurs in the winter, so the numbers aren't going to be huge coming back ever. But interestingly, people in Santa Cruz could say there's an eruption of monarchs in October when they all arrive for the overwintering. They are abundant everywhere at that time in backyards and all over the place. So monarch eruption in another place can occur. So resident butterflies, the Compton tortoiseshell is the first example of that. Resident boom or bust population cycles. Again, we know very little about these things, and so it's speculation on my part and other people's parts. But these slides here come from the book, or maybe they didn't make the cut for the book, but we were able to rear, Dave and I were able to rear this butterfly once because they were hard to find. It was just, there were a couple of years where numbers were quite high up in the northern parts of the state. They're gregarious during early instars, and then they become more solitary. But then something bad happens. This one here is showing signs of it already. It's not looking quite healthy. And that's not a healthy pose too. So this happened in Dave and I's rearing. In my rearing, 100% died because this is a diseased caterpillar. The body becomes limp and flaccid. It just becomes a bag full of fluid, but evil smelling fluid. A foul smelling black soup I put up there. And because of a virus, a baculovirus, which is a family of viruses that attack Lepidoptera. We think the genus is nucleopolyhedrovirus. And this has been reported before, and it probably is the major factor behind their boom bust cycles. In a normal year, or when they're not having a boom time, this virus is probably prevalent. Yes, ma'am.
I had a Milbert's tortoiseshell larvae do that.
Did you?
Yes. Would that be the same virus?
Well, a similar or related virus, or maybe the same. Probably unlikely to be the same, but the same genus. Yeah. So I've seen that in other tortoiseshells too, but not. I mean, our rearing was limited, but in this example, it was just 100%. Whereas
Mine was one out of 2 larvae, and one of them, one was fine, and the other one I froze.
Okay. So, but normally, in other species, you will get some, but not 100%. But this species seems to be very susceptible to whatever this virus is. So it may be the most important natural enemy regulating this species. It's certainly a difficult species to find in most years. And then closely related to Compton's is the mourning cloak, and I think it has probably the same natural enemy, the same disease problems that Compton's has. We have these years of great abundance followed by years of rarity. We mentioned earlier, abundant a few years ago, but currently uncommon. And again, they have a similar lifestyle with a large batch of eggs being laid and gregarious caterpillars. And with other caterpillars, pest caterpillars or economic caterpillars, you get more disease problems when they are gregarious because obviously they spread the disease amongst them, living together. So solitary caterpillars tend not to, if they're living solitarily, they're not going to catch the disease from another individual way away. So living together has advantages, of course, for protection, like this, spiny massive caterpillars, but it has a downside in that disease transmission is probably a problem. Once one caterpillar gets a disease, then the whole community can suffer. So I think mourning cloaks probably have the same. Have you seen disease mourning cloak caterpillars?
Yeah. What's interesting about cloak larvae is that we can go to a place like we did several years back and have this enormous number of larvae.
That picture was taken there.
Right. And just, it's an astounding phenomenon to see because, first of all, they're incredibly responsive, larvae. And part of that is that they're black and spiny. So, they are actually well defended against most things. In fact, a lot of parasites and things that would parasitize them, don't mess with them. But the baculovirus, of course, is something that don't have to worry about spines, right?
Right.
The other thing about that is that they often will move from an area, not in mass, but where the larvae produce large generation of adults, they'll often disperse from that site. So that seems to be a behavior that's adapted to a disease-based life cycle. If you're moving from an area where there might have been baculovirus into an area that might not.
Yes.
So I think you're right that virus is very important.
I think so. But it's not just those caterpillars, there are many caterpillars, and this is the same location at the same time. And so the transmission, this is a western tent caterpillar, so transmission could actually be from species to species too, couldn't it, if it's the same virus? Yes.
They weren't Western tent caterpillars.
Were they? What were they?
No, they're Malacosoma something I couldn't remember right now.
Oh, okay.
Maybe they're lots, so I don't have to, right?
Constrictor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah, constrictor.
But, this was taken in situ. They were suffering from this disease there at the time, even though we didn't see mourning cloak caterpillars suffering from disease at that time. It's quite likely they could be affected by other caterpillars. But as I said before, you've got to think about more than just one thing. So, the disease is probably important for those species, but there's probably other things involved too. And, as John mentioned, there are defences with some caterpillars to repel parasitic wasps. So, when John was out there, he'd shout and the caterpillars would just shake and move their heads, which they do when a wasp comes close to them or fly, they jerk and repel the fly, hopefully. But, some caterpillars do become parasitized, regardless of their defences. And I don't think, is this the Malacosoma thing again? This is
Yeah.
So, this has been parasitized by a tachinid fly. That's the egg of the tachinid fly there. And I don't think these caterpillars jerk or jump or try to evade the wasp. I think that's just debris, I think. So as well as the virus disease, they've got to contend with other pressures too. Parasitism and predation. We haven't mentioned predation yet. Predators going up and just eating them. Okay, moving on to another resident. And this is looking through my files of pictures. You'd think I'd have a picture of a. I don't. I haven't. Dave must have all the pictures of orange sulfur. So this is from online. You don't often get a picture of their wings, I think. In fact, it doesn't look real, but I think it is. But so we have these periodic late season outbreaks, particularly where we live around Yakima and the Tri-Cities, where there's a lot of alfalfa grown. And it's always at the end of the season, though, when generations have built up, and then there's a decline in natural enemy populations at that time. I know that from being an agricultural entomologist. That's when the predators and parasitoid populations prepare for overwintering, and their pressure on pest populations diminishes. But the orange sulfur is quite happy in the sunny days of autumn. We see them flying sometimes to Thanksgiving in warm autumns. So they take advantage, I think, of the reduced natural enemies and the huge areas of food that they have. And so you can have a lot of them at that time. But then winter kills them all. They haven't adapted yet or changed.
It doesn't kill all of them.
It doesn't kill all of them.
No, just most of them.
Most of them.
But it's the strategy that works, because if they have these huge numbers, they're going to be moving into areas like western Washington. We had a population established on one of the islands, San Juan Island, for like 4 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, they would survive there, wouldn't they? Yes.
Right. So like, anytime you have that opportunity and you're able to exploit it, then that's good for you. And they're suicide. Basically they're suicide butterflies. The adult females in flying in Thanksgiving, their eggs aren't going to make it.
No.
But it doesn't matter because the overall strategy is very, very healthy.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, and Becker's White, I've mentioned that already, about abundant postplant resources in a spring like this one. If you go to the east side, the growth that's occurring now, and we've had, spring only started a week ago. I mean, in fact, our first 70-degree day was, it was today, but it went to 80. So today was, so we didn't actually have a 70-degree day. I mean, the first day above the 60s was 80. So our growth of vegetation is incredible, just even in our own backyard. The grasses that the native grasses we don't usually see because they usually dry up so quickly, they're knee high, which is remarkable. So, the mustards and everything else, they're going to have a banner year.
Antelopes.
Sorry?
Antelopes.
Oh.
Sacha.
Sorry.
The skipper.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to go nuts.
You think? Well, there's a lot of things that are going to go nuts, aren't there? And Becker's is probably going to be one of them, because already in the limited observation, because the spring's been so bad this year, the few places I've seen Becker's, they've been in large numbers. Like normally you'd see 10 in a 2-hour walk. This year I've been seeing 50. And the same with silvery blues, where usually at the sites I go to see 5, 10 in a couple of hours, 50, which is quite remarkable. And Tonya had the informed idea that probably because, we had snow on the ground from November, from mid-November till just, early March, or beyond that, wasn't it? Mid-March, I think. So insulation for the pupae overwintering on the ground. They weren't exposed to the 10-degree temperatures or 0-degree temperatures that we had on occasions. So Becker's and silvery overwinter as pupae. So I think they had a very good year. But yet we had to see what happened to the larvae, but they were insulated too. For white of blues overwinter as immature larvae. So yeah, I think it could be a good year for butterflies, as John was saying earlier. And there's Becker's as it is right now in the canyons around Yakima. So the last species, the pine white, which is probably the most spectacular resident eruptor of all in terms of the enormous numbers in a relatively limited geographical area. I mean, they don't erupt away from pine forests, although there's some exceptions I'll talk about in a minute. That's where you see the large numbers in and around pine forests. So, ironically, Dave and I spent many years trying to rear this species for our book. We thought at one point it was going to be one of the ones that got away, but we did in the end. We just to find the females was difficult, and then when we got the females, it was very difficult to get them to lay eggs. But at last we succeeded, and it took many females and a lot of patience before we got eggs. In fact, I was checking my notes the other day. We got 80 eggs from 40 females. 40 females to get 80 eggs. I mean, most of those didn't lay, there's just a couple that did. And most of these eggs died during overwintering, and that makes me wonder if there is something happening with eggs too, because it seems that other people have said the same thing. Egg mortality seems to be very high. I don't know if there's some organism in eggs or disease that affects their eggs. This is something that nobody's looked at or even thought of, but because our experience seemed to be, we tried all sorts of conditions. Dave and I, as you know, were very fastidious about rearing this stuff, and we tried all sorts of options with no success, except for just 1 or 2 individuals. And so I'm wondering if there is something involved with the egg mortality. Yes, John?
Well, most of the females you're getting are already laid out, probably?
No, well, some were, but even ones that wouldn't lay. I mean, that was down to us. And then the ironic things, we have outbreaks that I'll talk about in a minute, where they're just laying eggs everywhere. So you think stick them in a cage, they lay eggs everywhere. But no, they were very difficult to get gravid females to lay eggs. And most of them were gravid, yeah, they weren't laid out or virgin. They should have laid eggs, but they didn't. So it's a bit of a mystery. But, once we got the eggs, the caterpillars were easy to rear. So they are, if you've got caterpillars, you can rear them relatively easy. And then the year after Dave and I struggled to get these images, they erupted, of course. Suddenly they were all over the place. And all the years of frustration it was just ironic. So none of these pictures are taken from Oregon Public TV, broadcasting, whatever. They actually had a good program, Field Guide, Oregon Field Guide on pine whites. You can Google it and check it out if you want. Most of these pictures are taken from that. Pretty good little documentary about the pine white outbreak in 2008 to 2012. So this pine white snowstorm in central Oregon, and I don't know how many of you saw them erupt 2008 to 2012, but it was pretty spectacular. There's dead whites on the ground there. This was also took some forest and photos from David Shaw at OSU, who took a lot of pictures at the time. This is Mopi here. This is a pond in the forest, just covered in pine whites, forming a mat on pond surfaces. And if you look in the history of this, and there is some documentation on this, because people were concerned about pine whites being an economic problem, damaging pine forests. So because they were a perceived economic threat, there was more research done on them. So there's more information on pine white eruptions than any other species by far. So they damaged the needles. I mean, it's amazing, with the frustrating years that we had to actually see the damage that they caused in the wild. The tips of the needles there that we've been chewing on the ends. We've got a picture of the damage here where we strip them. So there's just hordes of caterpillars when there's an outbreak. So much so that they cause severe needle loss on the trees. So this was during 2008 to the 2012 outbreak. And this is the grain of a forest by pine white caterpillar attack. And this is all, damaged by pine white. But interestingly, tree death is negligible. They didn't actually kill the trees. They reduced annual growth for up to 10 years afterwards. So they were, economically damaged. But they weren't killed, which is, they suspected they would be, but they're not. So, the concern about them is not as great as it would have been as, if they killed this. It's not like pine beetles, which will kill large areas of forest like that. And then, this is a bad picture taken from a plane windscreen at 13,000 feet with pine whites during that same outbreak. And they were fighting fires, and they actually had warnings to the plane, to the pilots, to be careful. I'm not sure what you can do about it. To watch your visibility because of the pine white smearing on your windscreen at 13,000 feet. So, they were so many, they were drifting upwards. And I saw that in reverse in the Wallowas. And those of you who went to the conference last year will remember this spot, because that's where we are there. This is us at the conference last July, whatever it was. In August 2010, I was at that spot, and I watched hundreds of pine whites just falling out of the sky. They were coming down like snow, literally. Just appearing out of the sky. And so, it all makes sense, with them at 13,000 feet in huge numbers and then dropping out in another location. There was no pine white outbreak in the Wallowas at that time that I was aware of anyway, maybe further south. Yes, Dave?
Unfortunately, I wasn't at this one. When you say falling out of the sky, were they falling out dead?
No, they're alive. No, it wasn't at the conference. This was in 2010 that I saw them. They were alive, just floating down, but they weren't just flying around. I mean, they were when they floated down, but I could actually see them floating down out of the sky and then just flying around. And similarly, we had in 2010 and 2011 pine whites raining on cities in the Yakima Valley, and this happened at our place in Yakima too. You go to bed one night, there's no no pine whites in our area. You wake up the next morning, there's pine whites around the pine tree in the backyard. And that happened to many people, well, the whole area in Tri-Cities and Yakima, the whole Yakima Valley. So presumably the same thing had happened. They'd just fallen out the sky overnight. And there were other reports too. I think Bob Pyle actually saw some, John.
Well, we had an old record from, Benton City or something, that we just said, somebody made a mistake. And you just said, well, maybe not. Maybe that was exactly the same thing happening.
Right, yeah. So the history of pine white eruptions, as I said, these are pretty well documented because the potential threat to the pine forests. And so, from 1881 to 2012, there's been 12 outbreaks lasting on average 1 to 5 years each in the last 137 years, and average out it's about one every decade, except, interestingly, the last one we had was well overdue, because the one before that, unless I've missed out one here, do you remember that one between 81, 84 to 2000?
Oh, yeah.
It was. So these guys got it wrong there. There's another one, was there? Because there should have been one around 1990 something.
Well, again, all of those outbreaks, if you actually look at them as they're plotted on the map, they're not in the same place.
No, that's right, in different locations.
Yeah, I think you can maybe go out of your way and say, well, they were extraordinarily abundant, but they weren't. Look, what you were just talking about down there in Oregon, that was a phenomenon.
Right.
That was like nothing I'd ever seen in my life.
One of these early ones was similar to that too.
Right.
It would, I think it was a Yakima Indian reservation. It was just, they were actually talking about the rivers clogged or the streams clogged with pine whites.
Well, there was a report from near Spokane in 1881 too.
Right.
So
that's right,
yeah.
So yeah, we're probably, if we're going back to if we had this one here, we're probably due for another one in the next few years. 2018 onwards, we might expect another pine white outbreak. But these things are fairly unpredictable, unfortunately, for the forester. And of course, so if we're wondering why they're outbreaking, obviously the host plants are never limited because there's plenty of forest all the time, so they're not short of food at any time. So the driver of eruptions, I think, is likely to be abundance of natural enemies. And this is a pneumonic wasp here, not a good picture, but it's actually on a pupa of a pine white. Got a better picture here. But it's been named because it's an economic pest, perceived to be. So they've done their homework and actually got identities for the major perceived natural enemies. So this is Theronia pulverescens, an pneumonic wasp. And at various times during the history of these outbreaks, there's actually a document that you've probably read it, that documents the whole thing. And at various times during outbreaks, they talk about these wasps being super abundant, buzzing around in people's heads, and so which is pneumonic wasps don't occur in plagues or anything like that. So it's obviously builds up a great amount on the pine white population, and it could be one of the major drivers of the outbreaks.
And how big is that wasp?
It's about 1 centimetre, I think. It's not tiny. It's
not counting antennae?
Well, you can see it on the pupa there. So the pupa stretches from there to there. So it's almost the length of the pupa. If you've got the book, you can check the length of the pupa. I can't remember. But so it's a fairly sizable creature. It's not something you'd miss. It's not a micro-parasitic wasp at all. But there's others. It's not just the one species. And as I said earlier, any biological control, and this is what the pine white regulation is, it's biological control of the pine whites, is achieved by a complex of natural enemies, not just a single one. So it's not just the pneumonic on its own. It may be the most important, but there's going to be other characters involved too. And this ugly beast is one of them. It's a sarcophagid or flesh fly. And a lot of these flesh flies just feed on flesh, as their name suggests, dead flesh. But there are some parasitic species, and this is one of them, that parasitize caterpillars. And this one has been reported as associated with the outbreaks of pine whites. So this could be playing a role too. And then there's been various reports of predators getting involved as well, stink bugs, like this one here. But these tend to come in afterwards when there's a lot of food around, rather than being a driver of the decline in the first place. They're just helping knock the population down, usually. This is a nymph of the stink bug with his rostrum or stylet piercing the caterpillar and sucking the life from a pine white caterpillar.
Sucking the
Just
life.
sucking their life. My daughter's not listening, she is. So it's an assemblage of natural enemies that are responsible for, I think, the pine white decline once they become abundant. And then it's the lack of natural enemies that causes the outbreak to occur in the first place. So finishing up now and looking at some general principles, of course, these are locusts, and I spent the early part of my career chasing Australian plague locusts in Australia, obviously. And so I'd see things like this, and so I guess that was my first experience of eruptions. And they still don't know. I mean, this is a very economic species, obviously, causing vast damage. And they still don't know the reasons why, beyond having rainfall and a lot of food for the swarms to develop on. There's very little known about natural enemies, for example. The exact causes are not known, so they can't predict when it's going to occur, when they're going to occur. So general principles are abundance of resources. The eruptions are generally caused by abundance of resources, which are usually mediated by climate. Rainfall causing a lot of host plants and or lower populations of natural enemies. They're the two main things, I think, that are always behind the eruptions. The natural enemies and abundance of resources. So, if you think about things like, just pick this at random, Western Green Hair Street, why don't we get eruptions of Western Green Hair Streets? Presumably because their host plant resources are limited. They feed on buckwheat, so you don't get buckwheats everywhere. John's got an idea.
Well, actually, sometimes you do, even with organisms that are rare. See, the thing is that the point that you're making is accurate, because the contrary, they're the exceptions that prove the rule.
Right.
Yeah. But you will get
an eruption of Western Green Hair Streets in a very small habitat,
Exactly.
like this year perhaps, because the resources available. Yeah, I take the point. But I guess, it's the definition of eruptions and being a wide area, and I'm sort of taking liberties with that as well. But yeah, presumably natural mortalities are always high as well, but we know nothing about that, what their natural enemies are, let alone what the pressures are. And then, there's things like cabbage whites. Some people might think are eruptors. I think Stuart said he saw lots of cabbage whites, but so we don't get what you'd call outbreaks or eruptions of cabbage whites generally. There may be some exceptions to that too. So as I said, the complex of the natural enemies are more effective in regulating than just one or two natural enemies. And some pests do have only just one or two natural enemies, and they can outbreak more. But when there's a lot of natural enemies, like cabbage whites, they've got wasps, ants, flies, stink bugs, beetles, spiders, viruses, bacteria, fungi, and they're the things that are being researched. There's other things too, nematodes, I think, as well. So, it's a jungle out there for them. And most species are probably like this, but, there's a few that aren't, and maybe they're the eruptors. But then, getting really technical, as much as this talk will get technical, we're looking at hares and lynxes here. So this is classic population oscillation, predator-prey relationship. And so you can see there's a very big oscillation. So at times, hares are extremely abundant, and then the lynxes come up and make them almost non-existent, and then it comes up again. So you get this cycle. So this would be like the pine white, where the natural enemies do a great job of bringing them down to nothing, and then they slacken off, and the butterfly is able to take advantage of that slackening off, and then they come back again. And so the oscillation is very large. It's either boom or bust, the title of the talk. But then in contrast, you've got...
I was just going to say, I observe that all the time in my neighborhood with rabbits and coyotes. I mean, I see rabbits everywhere, and then suddenly nobody can sleep for days because the coyotes are howling and howling and howling, then they clean everything up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I see that 2 or 3 times a year, sometimes once a year. This year, no coyotes, none. Now there's rabbits everywhere, and the other night I heard one. I thought, here they come. I was wondering. You just said the same thing I was wondering.
Interesting. We just got rabbits appearing in our backyard
Oh,
too.
get ready. Here they come, the coyotes.
So things like the cabbage white, I think, have probably got this sort of oscillation where it's not extreme. You know, it varies a bit, more abundant some years than others, but not such extreme, because they've got the predators, or the natural enemies, we should call that, a whole complex of natural enemies are fairly stable. There's always a large number of natural enemies, and so it doesn't allow the pest to, or in this case the cabbage white, to outrank them, outcompete them, outperform them. So that's pretty much my simplified explanation. And John's got something else to add?
No, one of the things that's interesting to me about, like I said, the cabbage white, if a butterfly as common as the cabbage white has one of these cycles going on, you have to ask the question about, like, it's near conjugate, it's like the Martian white, right? Is it possible that, congeneric, butterfly species or congeneric species in general, whether they're leps or what, might actually be impacted by, the increase or decrease of a predator on one of the other congenerics, right? And I'm thinking about the angle wings, and in particular, like, could the bacterial virus in a morning cloak affect, a California tortoiseshell, or the like? And so, like, what you've done is just added another factor to consider, right?
Well, it's true. I mean, angle wings tend to disappear when morning cloaks disappear, don't they?
Right.
So there could be some overlap there too. Okay, so the ecology of eruptions is still not well understood, even after my talk, even for economically important species. And looking at the literature, granted pest mostly, the focus has often been on single factor explanations. That's where the research is led. And so it hasn't really explained things, because it's more likely that eruptions are determined by multiple factors that are hard to model, to get proof, to mathematically model and to prove that the factors are involved is a lot harder when there's multiple factors involved. And it hasn't really been a high priority for even agricultural entomologists to work on this, really. There's been a lot of other things that have taken priority. So really, we don't know much about these things, but they do occur, and probably the principles that I've explained have probably got a lot to do with them. But we've still got a lot to learn. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, I will answer them.
Has anyone tried to use painted ladies to control thistle?
Not to my knowledge, I don't think so. It'd be a bit hard to control them. I mean, you mean, you just mass rearing them and put in
I had a dumb idea back in the early 90s when I lived in Montana, and there was a pasture across the road that was full of thistle, and one year it was completely covered with a lot of painted ladies, so I thought, I'm going to make $1 million. And I called the state and asked the entomologist over there, and he said, well, the problem is that they're probably going to lay their eggs, and they'll probably get another generation, but that generation, since they tend to be migratory, they're just going to take off and go somewhere, and they won't control the local population of thistle. So he said it probably won't work, and so I just gave it up. This generation, but that generation, since they tend to be migratory, they're just going to take off and go somewhere, and they won't control the local population of thistle. So he said it probably won't work, and so I just gave it up.
and they feed on other things besides thistles too. So they're not obligatory on feeding on thistles.
Well, how about the viruses, and can the viruses be used?
Well, yes. I mean, viruses are used in pest control. I mean, you can actually buy viruses. In fact, a very famous pesticide called Bacillus thuringiensis is a bacterial disease, and there are viruses that you can perches too.
Yeah.
So they are used in pest management, not widely or very commonly, but they have been exploited to some extent. So that, yeah, is something that has happened.
You mentioned that this winter it was cold and you had snow on the ground for a long period of time. And I just wonder if people kind of make a note of how the weather conditions are over the year. That, maybe I might say, well, it was a cold winter, but not only was it a cold winter, but there was snow on the ground. And maybe that favored the butterfly population, but it was harmful to the disease condition or something like that. Just kind of a complication like that. I don't know how you'd even study something that's just, there are so many different things that can affect, and when they all line up just right, then you got thousands of them, and you just wonder, how could this happen? But it's just lining up 100 different things just in the right way. And we just are inclined to oversimplify it and say, it was a cold winter. Well, it was way more complicated.
Yeah, it's way more complicated than that. Yes, you're right. I mean, there's probably a lot of factors involved that we have no idea about. But certainly the principle of insulation of snow is definitely established thing. And we know, it's 0 degrees, not 0 degrees centigrade, 32 degrees Fahrenheit in the snow all the time. I did work on the Ona's Little Blue in Oregon, and we measured the temperature all winter long. And looking at the graph, it suddenly get the snow part, and then it's a straight line all through the winter. So where the pupae over winter, it's 32 degrees the whole time. And yet, above the snow, it's down to minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And so it's a definite advantage for a lot of things to have a snow insulation. Yes, in back.
About 20 years ago, I saw a painted lady eruption in the thumb area of Michigan. Any idea where they could have come from? Because this was farmland, and there was nothing to support that size of population there.
I don't know. I haven't heard much about eastern US painted lady populations. Do they move from the south down there, John?
Most of the time, like for instance, Andy was telling me from Gainesville, painted ladies were rare butterflies there.
Yes, I don't think they.
Yeah.
No, so
I don't think anyone really knows. Maybe they come from Mexico too.
Well, who knows? Or maybe, that high-level transport.
3,000 feet up, you got nothing to really stop it.
No, nobody takes any notice of painted ladies either, do they?
Well, they're recorded periodically, but mostly like that anecdotal, right? And like this year's a big year.
Right, but I mean, as in actual migration, moving. Well, except in California. They may be returning south in the autumn, but we don't see them, or we look in, or people just don't.
Well, you mentioned the radar. There's been one documented radar sighting in Canada in the last decade. Noticing the same thing. I would assume that you did that that's happening all the time. It makes absolutely no biological sense to expand your range to just die.
Except if you're an orange sulfur. Yep.
Can you tell us the species in the photo of all of the tortoise shells? Was it just tortoise shells? That one?
The continental tortoise shell?
All of them.
Oh, the California tortoise shell.
Yeah.
That picture, it had more than California tortoise shells in it, yes. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, was it just California?
No.
There was something else.
There was angle wings in there.
Which one, do you know?
No. That photo isn't one of mine.
Okay.
But I could identify angle wings, and I think there was a morning cloak in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But most of them were California tortoise shells.
Okay.
Yes,
Do
Richard.
we know much about the elevations or the heights that they may catch favorable winds, like 3,000 feet, but what if it's 15,000 feet or 30,000 feet, and somehow they just know that it's up there if they can get that high, and then they can just go 500 miles.
Nobody knows.
Very
Nobody
quickly.
knows. Yeah.
It's just something not well known.
No, nobody's. I mean, the people who worked on that most have been in England, at Rothamsted, with their their radar and stuff, but I don't know if they've actually looked higher than the 3,000 feet they look at.
Wouldn't it be too cold though?
Well, you get to a certain level where it will get too cold at certain times. So maybe 3,000 is optimal. Maybe I don't know about that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.